The only thing I'm really grateful for in this is that he didn't introduce us as a new singing group.
Wouldn't last long.
Even kindness then wouldn't have helped. Inshallah khoshal hasti. I know you have to be very, very happy and very, very proud. I think that this event brought together by the National Youth Committee, really directed by the National Spiritual Assembly to make this possible, is something unique for all of us. And I'm sure that you've been hearing that for a couple of days. We've had the privilege of being next door with your children. They're absolutely fabulous, which means that their parents have to be utterly marvelous, and that's what you are. You have created this. You have brought about the possibilities for this to happen. And I've had the opportunity in the last couple of days to talk with some of the members of the National Spiritual Assembly, and what they have said is that, why haven't we been doing this all along? Why has it taken so long for us to all be together? The children, the youth, and their parents, all together. Even though seemingly we're separated, but nevertheless, there is that feeling that we have by just being so close. And I'm just saying something that you already know. On behalf of the Board of Counselors in the Americas, I bring you their warmest loving greetings. Well, what we hope to be able to do this morning is to share a few of these kinds of remarks, and then we have probably quite a bit of time together, and that we would like to get into a conversation. So that if you have things that you want, what are we doing with your kids, things of that sort, we would like to get in that kind of a talk together. The whole process of the Baha'i community was summed up in the songs and in the order of the songs of New Horizons this morning. And think of it in terms of what it means to be part of a family. They started off, we all joined together in singing "Blessed is the Spot." And I, as a parent, remembering when we were beginning to just teach those words to the children. And for many of our children, those were the first words of the Baha'i writings that they learned. And brings back those wonderful moments in the development of our families and our relationship with our children. And then they went on, after internalizing the ideas of Baha'u'llah, we all joined together and we listened to them as they sang about teaching the masses. And then we got all exuberant because we were marching to the kingdom. And that's the process. That's exactly what we're all about. And it was epitomized in a few moments of song. And that's what we were beginning to feel here, this kind of relationship that we must have with each other, this love, this confidence, this trust. You've been hearing all these things, that they're standing on your shoulders. You know what's happening at this conference? They're really now understanding that. Those have been words to them for a long, long time. But the youth now really begin to realize their relationship and the significance of what we as parents have done for them. And so hopefully what will come from here is a new and strengthened relationship that you will have within your families. And that's what we'd really like to talk about this morning, amongst the many other things that we'd like to talk about. And I'd like to just start by saying that one thing that they have been doing, that more and more of the youth have been doing over the past year, over the past 2 years, is begin to seriously relate to the messages of the House of Justice. And they are beginning to talk about the implications of the ideas that the House of Justice has given to the youth. You know, if you think of it in a historic perspective, the House of Justice has sent to the youth of the world 2 major messages within a 16-month period. This is unique in history. This is the kind of situation that they have to have someone to talk with. And so what I would like to suggest is that you have copies of those 2 messages, and that you talk with your children about the implications of what those messages say. That you literally sit down and read them together, if you haven't done so already. And if you've done so, do it again after the inspiration and the movement of this weekend. And then in relationship with that you take the last 2 or 3 Rizwan messages from the House of Justice to the Baha'is of the world, and you read those together in conjunction with the 2 messages to the youth. You know, in terms of our relationship, of what is happening in the family, in our relationships with each other, this is the kind of thing that I feel that the House of Justice is guiding us to become. That the acceptance of each other as we are, and that when the children and the youth come in while we're doing something that seems to be so significant and so important, that within reason we let them interrupt. That's part of that conscious understanding of a growing relationship. Because most of the time, the problems that we have are kinds of things that at other moments would not be upsetting. Most of our problems come from the fact that somebody's interrupting our agenda. And the same thing that upsets us at one moment has absolutely no negative effects on us at another moment. The exact same activity. But it depends on the agenda that we have at that particular moment. And this is why I feel that in terms of a family relationship to the messages, particularly the recent messages of the last couple of years, and with emphasis on the messages to the youth, that the families and the friends and the aunts and the uncles consult on these things together. Read them together. And they will bind that family unity to an extent that will be just unimaginable. Because then the significant will be always at the forefront. These are some of the kinds of things that we'd like to talk about this morning. That's really all the remarks that I have. And now I have the real pleasure to bring to you one of my fellow counselors who his heart is in Latin America. But fortunately for us, his physical presence and his spirit has been in North America with his family now for over a year. And his presence has been a galvanizing force. He won't like me for saying these kinds of things, and he'll get me later.
Good.
But his depth of understanding and his love for the cause, which is translated in his love, especially for the youth, has been such that it has been one of the major means for galvanizing them around this concept of moving the world, of assisting them to mobilize the forces that we have latent here, that you have developed, bringing it into some kind of reality. And so it's really with a great pleasure that I introduce to you Councillor Farzam Arbab.
I will get him later. Allah Akbar, friends. I would really like to thank the organizers of this conference for having created this opportunity. Because for the past year I have wanted to have an opportunity like this to share some thoughts with you. During this past year I had the privilege of participating with some of the youth in both United States and Canada in a search for ways to respond to the call of the Universal House of Justice that youth can move the world. We were looking for something that was more than just words and simple emotions. We wanted to take the words seriously, and we wanted to find a way that they would really do this, that their generation would really stand up and carry out what the Universal House of Justice was so clearly asking them to do. During that time, always I wanted to have a chance to be with you, the parents of those youth, and express to you the highest sense of admiration and to congratulate you for the way you have educated a most wonderful generation of Baha'i youth. I know you have heard that from many people, but I have to say it also because it is in my heart. About a year ago, as a result of consultations with the two national assemblies of the United States and Canada, a number of meetings were held to consult with the youth about the possibilities of rekindling a youth movement. A movement which would allow them really to lead their peers in the next decades or so in large numbers and face the very unique challenges that the end of this century is bringing to us. You know, like some of you in this audience, I belong to that generation. I was here studying during the time when exactly our generation of youth, not just within the faith, outside the faith, decided that they were going to rise and really change the world. At the time, we, the small number of Baha'i youth, in a certain sense were not ready for it. We ran after it. Rather than leading it, we ran after it, and we know what happened to it. It dissipated. It ended up in the pursuit of all pleasures, of drugs, of political power, and we lost it. When we consulted about these ideas, we felt that could we make sure that this time, next time, as the world begins to go through another stage of agitation, as the very same causes that were there in the 60s once again are coming to the forefront of the thinking of the American people. And as now our children were coming to be the youth, the generation of youth of this age, of the middle of 80s on, could we make sure that this time the Baha'i youth would create this spirit so that once again the youth of America would not rise and then be misled and then go towards goals that would once again miss the opportunities that God has given us. Now, in those meetings of consultation, really before that, I didn't know what I was going to. I couldn't imagine until the first meeting at Llewellyn how high the quality of these youth was. I was amazed at their spiritual susceptibility, the purity of their intentions, the sincerity of their faith, and their readiness to obey the call of the Universal House of Justice. Of course, I do recognize that the circumstances are not the same either. The sacrifices of the Baha'is of Iran have released such great powers in the world that everything seems to be changed. And potentials that before we could not dream about are truly becoming reality. So, on the one hand, I would like to thank you, the parents of those youth, for the wonderful work you have done to give the world, at this very important moment, youth of such quality, Baha'i youth of such quality, for their destiny is very, very high. At the same time, I recognize that these same youth, because of the sacrifices of their brothers and sisters of Iran, are recreated, and that potentials that you slowly and gradually try to develop in them are now coming forth with a great deal of strength because of what the brothers and sisters, also children of parents like yourselves and some of yourselves here, are doing. We were talking with the youth that every one of us has the possibility, every one of us individually and collectively as communities, have the possibilities of becoming special instruments, becoming instruments in the hands of God, so that the power of Baha'u'llah can work through us. But at times, at very special times, the hand of God raises special instruments to carry out special tasks. We are hoping and we are praying in our hearts that the youth of this generation will be one such special instrument, and that they will do during this last part of this century something so special that it will be remembered throughout the history, as we remember the wonderful, the glorious accomplishments of the first generation of the Baha'i youth 140 years ago. This is our hope. Now, to tell you the truth, this is really what I wanted to tell you. This is what was in my mind for a year, and that is what I wanted to express to you. But since it probably is not acceptable that just say those few words, let me share a couple of other thoughts with you as well. Take the opportunity. As parents of a youth, of a 16-year-old youth, my wife and I, like many of you, are constantly thinking about the future of our son. Now, whenever any of us consult about the future of our children, the central concept that comes into play is that of excellence. We all want the best for our children. But then we also know that it is sometimes difficult to figure out what is best. First of all, with whatever means is at our disposal, we try to create a healthy physical environment for our children. Good nutrition, sanitary conditions, good medical advice, healthy exercise, clean recreation, and all for the best that we can achieve in the physical growth of our children. But then we also know that we cannot follow the trends of a materialistic society. And we cannot, as this materialistic society does, we cannot put physical comfort as the final goal of human existence. Some of us remember often the statement of Abdul-Baha that we should actually accustom our children to physical hardship. So, when we think about these things, then the word that comes to our mind is moderation. And we all try to say, well, we have to be moderate. But again, somehow just saying that moderation doesn't seem to solve our problems. Because we have difficulty finding where the point of moderation is. As someone was saying, moderation is not somewhere between Baha'i standards and the standards of the world. So, in the sense of the physical existence of our children, we have to decide where the point of moderation of material comfort is. But where? In a world where 800 people are at the verge of starvation, is the lifestyle of a typical family living in the extreme prosperous North American society to be defined as luxury or moderation? Now, again, the answer may be easy theoretically, but it really is not easy in practice. For after all, we don't live in villages of the world. You do live in environments where it is extremely prosperous. You know, sometimes we listen to data and it sort of goes above our head. This is a country where the average income per person is somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000, and most of the people of the world live with an average income of somewhere $300, $400, $500 a year. So this is really luxury. This is not moderation if we look at the entire picture of the world. And it becomes even harder when we recognize that now, with 3 million Baha'is in the world, a good number of those people out there, a good number of those 800 million who are starving, are Baha'is. And from the 40,000 children who die from malnutrition every day, quite a few of them are Baha'i children who also say their prayers and are learning the prayers of Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha as our children are. So we really have got some big decisions to make as we think about what is best for our children. Now, beyond physical growth, wishing the best for our children translates itself further in our plans for their intellectual development. The principal concept again is excellence. We wish them to receive the best education and become excellent in an art or profession. But again, we have to be careful not to follow the trends of a society which has no spiritual aspirations at all and defines social position, power, and prestige added to a comfortable life, too comfortable life, as the highest aim of individual achievement. The answer again we give to that is moderation. But we must develop a deeper understanding of what the point of moderation is. We must assure that our understanding of excellence comes from Abdul Baha and not from society. In order to do that, we must study and consult as parents on the different references to excellence in the Baha'i writings, and not simply cling to one or two quotations that we like. For example, we must look at a quotation, at the passage, like the one where Abdul Baha says that I hope that while you're studying in this college, this was addressed certainly to some person or some people, you may so excel all other students in the various branches of knowledge taught therein that all of them may testify that the Baha'i students have another power, are inspired with another effort, are imbued with a nobler ambition, are stimulated by higher motives, and make wider and deeper exertions than others. That is true. But we can't just take that and define excellence that all our children have to be first in their classes and that's it. Because we do have to read the other passages on excellence, where Abdul Baha, for example, very clearly says, I desire distinction for you. The Baha'is must be distinguished from others of humanity, but this distinction must not depend upon wealth, that they should become more affluent than others. I do not desire for you financial distinction. I do not desire for you financial distinction. It is not an ordinary distinction I desire, not scientific, commercial, industrial distinction. For you I desire spiritual distinction. So as we do look about what is best for our children and how we educate them and what level of excellence we want for them, hopefully we will not fall in the ways of this materialistic society and will not begin to have just an image of excellence in my child's life means that he should get such a degree, become such a professional, have such a house, live in such a neighborhood, have so many cars, and then, strangely enough, we say that is good for the prestige of the faith. We are doing all of that for the prestige of the faith. Is the prestige of the faith in the number of doctors or the number of PhDs or the number of professionals we have? Every other community, every other religious community can boast much more than that, and it will be very difficult for us to catch up with them, with the numbers we have. The prestige of the faith is in the fact that every one of us, whether he's a farmer, whether he's a doctor, whether he's a civil servant, whether he's a clerk, whether he's a student, whatever he is doing, he is excellent. That is the standard of excellence that we need to set up, and that is our prestige. But not in the... Now also, as Baha'i parents, we desire best for our children in the spiritual realm. We don't stop at the intellectual excellence. In this modern society, this is no easy task, and much of our energies are focused on developing the character of our children, their moral rectitude, their purity, their freedom from prejudice, their sense of service, and their love for mankind. As I have mentioned before, I really feel you have done such an excellent job in that. And God willing, will continue to do so. But here again, as we consult among ourselves, there is a great danger that we would set the standard too low for our children. There is the danger of defining our vision of a spirituality in terms of the best of moral codes of the society around us, which of course do not disagree with the Baha'i writings. To be a good American, not to lie, to be honest, not to do anybody any harm, be loving and be peace-loving. If we define that as the standard for our children, we will also have fallen short of what is really best for them. Because those positions are very passive positions. Our definition of a Baha'i is not just somebody who doesn't do any harm to anybody. That is too passive. That is a minimum. And to define moderation as minimum is certainly not appropriate. Now, questions like these come up in our consultations, in your consultations as families, among parents, constantly. I would like to remind you, though, that two facts are making it more urgent that we answer these questions better than we have ever been able to answer them. The first is the sacrifice of the Baha'is of Iran. When we see the acts of heroism of a 16-year-old girl in Shiraz, we have to redefine what we have traditionally considered to be moderation. We have to allow sacrifice to enter into our equation. And we have to include into our deepenings and our deliberations of the education of our children the thousands of passages that maybe we have set aside. The passages that talk about absolute detachment from all earthly things. The passages that talk about total submission to the will of God. Passages that talk about burning in the fire of love of God. They ask for absolute devotion, absolute dedication of all. Passages that ask for the highest degree of sacrifice. We should bring those passages back again into our consultations to a much larger degree than maybe we have been doing in the past. We can't just not pay attention and treat certain passages in the writings as wonderful, beautiful poetry. Hidden words like, O son of being, seek a martyr's death in my path, content with my pleasure and thankful for that which I ordain, that thou mayest repose with me beneath the canopy of majesty behind the tabernacle of glory. O son of man, ponder and reflect Is it thy wish to die upon thy bed, or to shed thy lifeblood on the dust, a martyr in my path, and so become the manifestation of my command and the revealer of my light in the highest paradise? Judge thou aright, O servant. These have to enter into our definition of what moderation is. The second fact that really is pushing us to seek a new understanding of the concept of moderation and excellence are the clear signs of a rapid destruction of the old world order in this latter part of the century. The simple breakdown of every social institution, the total failure of the leaders of the world to curb the process of disintegration, the food shortage, political unrest, the increasing poverty, and the level of human misery are enough to convince any observer that the unprecedented difficulties are awaiting mankind in the next few decades. We do not have to talk about great wars and great calamities. We could not. That doesn't matter. The point is that the world is really disintegrating around us. Now, independent of our concern for the future of mankind, which is at the heart of our faith, really, can we, just from practical point of view, can we sit in America and believe that the prosperous countries of North America and Western Europe will be able to follow their present path of prosperity in the midst of a sea of unrest and misery? Can anybody believe that? Will we then be giving the best to our children if we educate them only for a future that is collapsing around us? Trying to make them members of a society that will not last and will fall apart necessarily? Educating them according to the standards of American schools and universities, of American business and technology, and the American society at large, which somehow seems to be asleep and oblivious to what is happening to this planet, and only responds to situations of extreme crisis when its mass media decide to bring to its attention conditions like Ethiopia, and ask it for insignificant acts of charity. But we really have to decide if this condition, in a world as it is, this island of prosperity, can survive. Now, wouldn't an excellent education mean involvement in this world and first-hand knowledge of the conditions of its people, so that the fruits of modern science and technology that our children and our youth are learning in this prosperous society can actually be applied to the process of construction of a new world order by individuals who have reached high level of excellence in spirituality and in their intellectual understanding and in their skills and abilities. That would be a far more reasonable way of thinking about the education of our children. The Universal House of Justice has, in their great wisdom, decided that this is the time that they would suggest to the Baha'i youth of the world to take off 1 or 2 years from whatever they're doing and go to the world. Go and get involved in the life of the peoples of the world. Contribute something to the well-being of the people of the world. They can come back and continue their education afterwards. It is essential that the North American youth And you as their parents, respond to this call of the Universal House of Justice. And I hope that from these very few remarks, you can remember that when you do send them for a year of service or 2 years of service, you are continuing their education. You are not taking them away from something. You are giving them something far better. For otherwise, as the world goes through the kind of chaotic confusion that it is going to go, we are going to have thousands and thousands of beautiful Baha'is in North America who don't know anything about the rest of the world. How are they going to contribute to the building of a new world if they are so immersed in their own society, which really, friends, although it has got power and money, it is beginning to look more and more irrelevant to the entire world. So, these are some of the things that we all think about. These are the things that we have to deal with as we bring up our children, as we consult with our youth, as we decide about their future. Like everything, we don't know what the best decisions are. It is hard to make decisions. It is hard to consult and to counsel our children. We all know that. But we can only hope that we will do the best. And we can pray that we become confirmed in our efforts. And certainly, I for one have no doubt that you will do very well. Thank you.
It is with great pleasure that I present to this Parents' Conference a fellow parent and our dear counselor from the International Teaching Center, Hooper Dunbar.
I always bring some papers with me to the platform in case I run out of things to say, which usually doesn't happen, and I usually don't read all the papers either. Friends, I think that's been made clear. I'm not the representative either of the Teaching Center or of the House of Justice at this conference. I've brought my son here to attend this youth conference and with my family, and we're happy to participate in any way we can. The House of Justice has encouraged the counselor members of the International Teaching Center to travel, to meet with the friends, to familiarize themselves with the conditions of the cause, all of which contributes to the efficacy of the work we're called upon to do there in the Holy Land in support of the activities of the Universal House of Justice. But I think it would be fair to say that the excitement among the individual members of these institutions about this conference is such that I can convey to you their very loving greetings. They are thinking about this conference. They've been thinking about it for a long time. And great hope, I should say, is placed in it by the Universal House of Justice. It certainly will be the largest, I believe, the largest. Let that be outdone later on in the year, I hope, somewhere. But for now, it seems it's going to be the largest Baha'i youth gathering in this International Year of Youth. And it is important because of the size of the Baha'i community, because of the experience of the Baha'i community, because of the wealth of the Baha'i community here in North America, that it respond befittingly to the vision and call of the House of Justice in these recent messages to the Baha'i youth. I think you've had this message here too, haven't you? Have you had this message to the...
message?
Yes.
We have not read it.
I hope you'll have a chance to see it and read it soon. What the remarks that I would like to make initially had to do with the changes that are taking place in the cause of God during these past few years. The House of God, the House of Justice, God's universal House of Justice, announced at the beginning of the year that we had emerged from obscurity. We are no longer emerging from obscurity. They said the cause of God has emerged from obscurity. Now, this movement from obscurity, unmitigated obscurity, as the Guardian said, towards the worldwide renown of the cause of God and the eventual acclamation of the sovereignty, the rightful sovereignty of Baha'u'llah over the hearts of all mankind, is a continual process. We have reached an important landmark. The name of the faith is now known to mankind. What it stands for is the next stage in its development. That is the knowledge that we must communicate to the peoples of the world now. We can think of this, I think, just in the small context of this one process, that from the beginnings of our existence, where we viewed ourselves more or less as a caterpillar, so to speak, we have gone into the chrysalis of the development of the administrative order of the cause. And there, the workings of God have been acting in our midst. We have been busy with our own affairs. We have been trying to become better Baha'is. We have been acting in relation with each other, in the administrative order, in the development of our assemblies, and so on. We have been looking very closely at our immediate work. The time we've come into now gives us the opportunity to see in new ways, and also reveals a depth of understanding about what's been happening to us up to this time. The chrysalis has broken. The cause of God is emerging out of the obscurity that it was in. It was unknown. And still to us, it's unknown what it is. We're still thinking in terms of caterpillars. But there is now, out of this chrysalis, emerging a butterfly. Something that's going to soar. Its wings are not quite unfolded. We see some flashes of brilliant color. We're not sure just what the shape of this is going to take. But we can be sure that it's something unprecedented, unforeseen in its nature. The House of Justice is out in front of us, beholding the wonder of the possibilities before us. Now, their messages are telling us these things in subtle ways and in direct ways. I think that perhaps one of the most direct quotations or passages that they've given us is in the message on finances, not this last one, but the year before that, when they told us about the possibilities open to the cause of God, but that this would need more finance. We can go on, if we contribute the way we're contributing, we can go on with the way we're developing. But the House of Justice sees special opportunities and possibilities if it had more means in its hands. Again, the fund this year has come up to the level of the year before. But it needs, if there's the possibility of it going higher, then things will happen even swifter, even faster in the development of the faith. Well, these are the hints that they're giving us. They themselves have had to re-examine their own work. My wife and I now have been in the Holy Land 12 years, and we've seen the House of Justice and its members passing through their various activities, the intensity of their activities. We have seen this long period of consolidation, the period in which effective teaching has been nurtured and was the focus of the cause of God, focus of the House of Justice in the Baha'i world. And now we've seen how new questions, as a result of those events that have taken place in Iran, in the cradle of the faith, the sacrifices of the friends that have been made there, which have, because of that sacrifice, produced this motion, this new development in the cause of God. We see the House of Justice drawing new things to its agenda, new topics, and new horizons opening on all sides. It is very, very exciting, I can tell you. You will be excited if you go to the Holy Land and visit there for a while. You would imagine maybe that living in the Holy Land, this would become a part of one's life. It doesn't. It's increasingly exciting. And I can tell you something more than that. It is increasingly exciting to the members of the House of Justice, who stand witness to these sudden surges of inspiration from on high, and something unfolds in the cause of God that they hadn't even contemplated previously. It is very exciting. Now, it should occur to us that the House of Justice was the center for all of the news and information related to the progressive stages in the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran. Many of you also have suffered from those events personally, of loss of family members, from the harassment of your relatives. The House of Justice felt this acutely. It consulted in its meetings. It took those steps and stages that it needed to take for the protection of the cause, and in the light of the guidance it received from Baha'u'llah. You can be sure they were not unattending to this matter. You can be sure that they were crushed, that they were bent over, that sometimes the House of Justice member who was present on the Tuesday morning to greet the staff and say prayers would openly weep before us from the frustration that they felt, from the anxiety that they felt, from the phone calls and messages and telexes that were coming to their table, from the terrible rumors that came of things that were happening that didn't happen, but yet you had to suffer the blow of thinking they were happening until the matter was clarified. This was a fire, an intense fire, and it's borne a great fruit. We don't know what the activities, what stages are yet ahead of us with regard to the persecutions in Iran. We pray that the publicity and the efforts that the National Assemblies and the friends around the world have made to bring this question, this injustice, to the peoples of mankind, to the governments of the world, is going to have a continuing, staying effect. But we don't know. Meanwhile, the great fruit, as I say, of this whole process is that the cause has emerged from obscurity. And the House of Justice has looked at these changes and has called us now to begin to relate more intimately with human society around us. There was a premonition of this in the Rizwan message before the message of October, 1983, on social and economic development. The House of Justice had to begin to look at some of those mighty undertakings that were mentioned by the beloved guardian, that it must engage in the service of the human race as the head of the Baha'i community that stands for service to mankind. One of the interesting things as we began to speak about this in the Holy Land was to realize that the cause, the international Baha'i community, was already perceived as a development project in certain quarters by non-Baha'is. Here was the only international community with such extension with members amongst the most highly educated in the world, as well as a mass of believers in many areas barefoot and without the means of any education, entirely pre-literate or illiterate. This is quite something. We have been engaged in the greatest development project that's ever come to this planet. We have been developing entities for consultative action for the betterment of community life all over the world. This is what we're doing with our local spiritual assemblies. We mustn't think that we were doing something that didn't help mankind. We were providing the very basis for all these things that are going to happen now in the future. And you look across the world, 30,000 of these have been established. Some of them are not yet active. There's another 32,000 communities with 9 or more members that can't figure out how to elect their own assemblies yet. If we could get those elected, we would double the number of local assemblies in the world right now. That tells you how those of us that can read and write have a responsibility to get out and help the rest of them to be able to... So social and economic development as a means of freeing the Baha'is from the limited agenda of their own internal consolidation, assisting them by having them serve the community. This has opened up a new way of action for the Baha'is. And it's one that has been closely related to all of its previous actions, as we're saying, to prayer, to meditation, to the study of the faith and what it means for their fellow citizens. And it powerfully reinforces the teaching work, because as the Baha'is act and engage in these various service projects and activities, they take pride in what they're doing. The community takes notice in it. They're attracted by the spirit of the Baha'is. They immediately want to know about the faith, and a whole range of new teaching opportunities open up before the believers. Not only that, but government immediately takes interest. Here's somebody doing something. Why are they doing it? Who's paying them? Nobody's paying them. What's motivating them? And immediately the question of the cause comes to the fore. And we find the Baha'is being awarded or being recognized in different ways by governments in Africa, in Asia, in the Americas. This is a wonderful thing. And your youth, your children, are going to be important workers in this process. They must be. They have the training, the skills that should be applied to all of this work. Now, we move a little farther, and the House of Justice has special consultations and discusses further these new opportunities before the cause. And it called on the youth of the world again. It felt impelled. It felt guided by Baha'u'llah to draw to the attention of the Baha'i world the role of youth and the part they can play in bridging us from the knowledge that the public has of the faith as a persecuted sect in Iran to the knowledge that the public must acquire of the faith in all of its multiple meanings for the well-being and benefit of mankind. In launching the International Youth Year, the House of Justice addressed a message to the National Spiritual Assemblies, 31st of January of this year, in which it calls attention to the themes that the youth should be discussing, in fact, that all the Baha'is should be discussing, in preparation for the International Year of Peace. Now, I know that the House of Justice is guided by God, but I wonder to what degree he's taking part in the decisions related to the various years commemorated by the United Nations organization. Because I think there's been more response and excitement in Haifa to those decisions than amongst the very committees that took them. They have provided a platform upon which the cause of God can perform, so to speak, really, with all that it has to give. And the youth have been told that they should carry on with the enthusiasm engendered during this year. They should carry this forward. It should be but a prelude this year to the services that we should perform in the promotion of peace for mankind. Now, why has this issue of peace suddenly become so important? We have the year of peace. This, of course, is intimately related to the statements of Abdu'l-Baha regarding the unity of nations, which must take place, will be firmly established, he says, in this century. The emergence of the lesser peace of mankind is on the agenda of the human race. We're the ones that know it's going to happen. And we're the only ones that can see out the other end of it. The rest of humanity is looking at a very gloomy, somber, ominous future. We know from the Master that the distant future is very, very bright. And Shoghi Effendi commented that he meant by that also that the immediate future was very, very dark. But we must look beyond this period. We must animate our fellow citizens and the peoples of the world with this vision of a united mankind. We must imbue the human race with the spirit of world solidarity. The powers released by the coming of the Bab and Baha'u'llah and their missions, which lasted a combined nearly 50 years of divine revelation. When you think of the manifestations of the past and compare this day with them, of course, you immediately realize the great significance of the time we live in. Christ's ministry, 3-year ministry. If you gather together the words of Jesus from the Gospels, you can read them in the early part of an evening. And look what a role Christianity has played in reviving the destinies of mankind in its various stages. Islam, what a power this has been across half the world. Through Muhammad's mission, through the revelation of the Quran, this one book, which now in Baha'u'llah's time we have the equivalent of 100 Qurans revealed by the manifestation of God. His tablets in the originals fill 100 volumes. Baha'u'llah himself, as you'll recall, has said that the greatest proof of the manifestation is his own person. After that, he says, is his revelation. After that, he says, are the verses he's revealed. The verses and the meaning. Now, what is this revelation in the middle? If it's not the verses he revealed, what is it? It's the power of spirit that's been released into the lives of mankind at this stage in its development. It's an effusion of celestial grace, as he says. It's an all-conquering power. It's a power that contains within it the design of the future. We don't have to invent and struggle to find out which way to go in the cause of God. It's all set forth for us. It's like the pattern that's imprinted in your human spirit, which, acting on the embryo of your being, gradually collects those organic elements necessary for the fulfillment of its purpose. And it's enshrined in the faith of Baha'u'llah in this day. Do you remember all those marvelous passages where he says that this force, this great force, this God-born force, released into the world, has endowed mankind with the capacity for all these various goals that Baha'u'llah has given? How he said that after the heroic age, these creative energies that are charging the world with excitement in the inner world, in the invisible world, were slowly crystallizing into visible agencies and instruments for their effective action in human society. Now that's the other thing you've been doing. This is this building of the administrative order. One by one, the Baha'is begin conforming their lives to the standard and teachings of Baha'u'llah, and they become instruments of this spirit. They become the embodiments of spirit, as the Master said in the Divine Plan. And by degrees, they become what he calls us to become, incarnate light. For this spirit is light. It's the light of God. It's the light of Baha, the very name of Baha. Light, splendor, glory has been shed on the human race. And that is gradually being mustered and marshaled by the Baha'is as they become aware of the great meaning of the cause of God through their study of the text, through their meditation, through their prayers, through that intuitive knowledge that's attracted to their hearts in service to the cause. And as it becomes a part of them, their collective association allows for the performance and appearance of new activities in the faith of God. The body of the cause of God is like a human body. As its organisms are developed, they can then begin to function. It requires a willingness on the part of the individual elements. It requires our personal effort to associate with each other in the manner in which the teachings call us to, for these latent capacities to be released, first in ourselves and then amongst ourselves as the body of the cause. Do you remember those passages from the Master where he said that the gifts of the Spirit circle the embryo, the gifts of the Spirit circle mankind in the same way that the powers of the human spirit circle the embryo at the beginning of its creation? Step by step, as capacity is created in that embryo, those powers appear. In the same way, the divine Spirit of God in this day is the animating power for the body of mankind. As mankind acquires the capacities, or the willingness, expresses the willingness through the sacrifices that you show, then these powers begin acting through it. And we shouldn't think that only the Baha'is are under the influence of this. All mankind is under the influence of it. We have a number of passages from the Guardian which says that other institutions, even unaware of the cause, are acting and being animated by these forces of Baha'u'llah. Anyone that lines up in the direction of the divine injunctions in this day is impelled forward. So we find various movements and activities and thinkers that are being confirmed spiritually because they've caught some ray of this magnificent sun of Baha'u'llah, and they're animated by it, they're quickened by it. Now, the House of Justice at the helm of the cause has been watching to see what the capacities developing in the Baha'i community are and setting in motion these new functions. One of the most exciting things about the emergence of the cause from obscurity is the emergence of the House of Justice from obscurity. How could the cause of God emerge from obscurity without the universal House of Justice also emerging from obscurity? And here we see the wisdom of the cause expressed in that body that decided to build this majestic, noble seat, that found that this seat, during the time it was being built, these persecutions began, at the time that it became the seat of the Universal House of Justice, that the House of Justice itself occupied its building there on the arc path, that the cause of God was being moved towards this emergence from obscurity. And now that has emerged from obscurity, there is this body at the center of the faith. They have contemplated their own role. And it was only last year, if I recall correctly, when for the first time a message went to the government of Israel, to the ministries, which instead of saying that the office of the Secretariat of the Baha'i International Community or the Department of Israel Affairs of the Baha'i World Center wish to send greetings or wish to commend the government or wish to ask for some consultation on some subject, that the House of Justice sent a message in which it said, conveyed the greetings and the wishes of the Universal House of Justice. Went to the government. And the government responded in proper kind. And now we have hosted there, the House of Justice has hosted the President of the State of Israel, the first president to be hosted in such a manner in the seat of the Universal House of Justice. It's very exciting. The next phase of this emergence of the House of Justice into the light of world knowledge was announced to us in the Rizwan message. The House of Justice has taken this very momentous decision to address the leaders of the world and the peoples of the planet and explain to them where we stand in human history. And they are busy working on that document right now. It's a message related to world peace and motivated by the coming International Year of Peace. It will be presented initially to the Secretary of the United Nations and then through the various national assemblies and local assemblies to the national and local authorities around the world, all over the face of the world. And I think we can see that even those communities where we don't have Baha'is in various parts of the world will be addressed through their ambassadors at the United Nations organization. This is going to be very exciting. As I say, the House of Justice out in front of us. We have to run to catch up. We should read all about these subjects they tell us. We should realize that they are called by Baha'u'llah to promote the lesser peace. That the lesser peace is also Baha'u'llah's gift to mankind. This is not something that was coming inevitably. It's coming because of the revelation. It's coming because of the influence of this Spirit in breaking down the old world order and building up a new hope for mankind. And your youth need your support to play their role. And that will be the proof of their greatness and show the distinction of the tree whose fruit they are. So that I hope that really Farzam has said everything that needs to be said on that subject. I was so appreciative to hear what he was saying to you. I hope that you will measure the zeal and capacity of your young offspring and assure that they have your support, that they also have your wisdom, the wisdom of your counsel. But in this process, we should be careful that we don't delay service to the cause for other purposes. There has to be a proper outlet. If you look back at the messages of the House of Justice to youth earlier on, they talk about this pull between service and teaching and pioneering and education. There is this pull. You have to see the state of your own youth. There are some believers who are so attracted by the cause and its message, who are awake to this vitality, that they really can't bear to sit down and study history and biology at the present moment. And we have to be able to measure that. Let them go out and spend some of this energy and some of this vision, a year or two in the field. They will also then discover that they need further means. We've seen this over and over. The youth that go out on these projects, they get out there and they see all that has to be done, and then they find a meaning for education. They have a meaning for study. If you find your children don't have that This may be one means of encouraging them towards it. And this is something that I think all the Baha'i families have to consider. I've seen some Baha'i youth in different continents that had great promise for the cause, great will to serve the faith, but they were very young. And their parents, wanting the best for them, desiring the best for them, squelched that, broke their will, and bound them to study. And after they finished their studies, they never regained the zeal that they had. They're specialists in all kinds of fields. They can make a contribution to human life. But that zeal that animated them earlier on in their life, which if it was given a chance to ripen, would have borne a tremendous benefit to the cause, has been lost. Now you have to measure. There's other youth that now realize that they need a means, an education, and a study. But if you can provide even a summer experience, you say, okay, don't break a whole year of school, but send your youth out for 3 months, 2 months to somewhere, to one of these international projects, to a national project if it's not possible internationally, and see how this will mature them. And see how the Spirit of God will enter into their lives. And then you will be able to take pride in them as Baha'is and in their services through the rest of the course of their lives. So thank you for